Hi, this is Josh Levy from Free Press. I'm here with Biella Coleman from McGill University. She's an anthropologist that studies digital cultures and hackers. And what we're going to talk about today is actually something a little far afield from what we usually discuss. And that is the kind of technology that we actually use and depend on every day. Both technology that's hosted in the cloud and lives online, but also the hardware that we use. And a question that I've been thinking about throughout this conference as I've seen so many of our friends using open source software. We've seen some examples of open source hardware like 3D printers, which are the coolest thing I've ever seen. I've been thinking to myself, you know, how important is it for me to adopt certain practices, digital practices, where I use open source software to get my work done and use open source hardware, or at least hardware that's more open than the Mac laptop that I know and love so much. And I know that you've had questions about that yourself, so I wonder if we can just have a quick discussion about why does it matter that you use Linux, for example, or that you don't use Apple, and you know, why are we worried about the direction that hardware and software is going?
So that's a great question. I think at some level, first of all, you know, to use it means to support it, and it's the only way that it's going to exist. If you don't, then you know you don't have a kind of user base. At the same time, it's definitely the case that if you're completely new to open source software, you don't necessarily need to just jump in fully by having a Linux operating system. You can, in fact, start by just using software, even on your proprietary operating system. So you can use Thunderbird for email, Firefox for web browsing, OpenOffice for word processing. And then that's a great way to kind of expose yourself to it.
So let's say I'm somebody who's new to the digital activism scene. I saw your panel yesterday in which you were talking about how hackers are helping to expose crucial information and creating new forms of journalism and of cultural participation. And I'm radicalized by it, and I'm excited, and I want to do more, and I want to change my life. How would you get me started with that, and what would you tell me that I should, you know, what are the steps that I should take to become more engaged with this ethos of openness and technological disruption?
Yeah, so it spans from using free software yourself. I think also learning a little bit about nonprofits like the Free Software Foundation is a really good place to go because they've collected a lot of material as to why it's important to have free software. And there's all sorts of reasons. I mean, I'll just give you sort of one example when it comes to your operating system. When you have a free software operating system, audits can be done. So one can know whether there is a backdoor there or not. When it comes to Microsoft or Apple, we just do not know that. So there's questions of kind of security that are really built into your system.
So, and that raises another question, which is increasingly we're becoming nervous about privacy online. And when we do access websites on a web browser, even if that web browser is open, like Firefox, we don't really know what information is being collected about our behavior. And I was actually introduced to a plugin for Chrome, and I think for Firefox too, that shows you all of the different companies that are tracking your behavior, that are putting cookies on your computer, and are basically watching where you go and where you've come from and building up these profiles of you as a person, as a human being, so that they can sell you products or sell you information or maybe do other things that you're not even aware of. So we can talk about the software that we adopt and the technology that we adopt, but how do we protect ourselves when we're out there in the ether of the web?
That's a great question, and it's hard to, and it's precisely these plugins like Collusion, which is the one that you're referring to, or another one, Track Me Nots, which makes it a little bit more difficult for sites to track your behavior. And these are essential to use for all sorts of reasons. I mean, one of which is to protect yourself, but then it makes the problem visible. And that's part of the problem. People don't even know what's going on when they're using these pieces of software. And it's important to emphasize you could be using free software, but the tracking is still going on. But this is where free software is so great. These sorts of plugins are being built for free software applications, and many of them can be built for other ones as well. But it's the open source community who's precisely doing this sort of work.
Great. Well, I think we have a huge debt to that community. And here at the conference, at the National Conference for Media Reform, there are lots of examples of how open source software is being used to help change the media and help support independent journalism and other initiatives that are bringing transparency to the media.